Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. I want to talk about some of the things I have learned over the past 18 months or so of building AI platforms and assistants for the enterprise. There's this gap between AI agents that look incredible in demos and ones that people actually open every morning, like they open their email. And I've been living in that gap, and I have some opinions about what fills it, and I'm going to share 10 of those with you here today. Quick intro. I'm an engineering architect working on AI. For the past 18 months, I've been building multi-agent systems over structured enterprise data. Think large-scale SQL databases, business critical stuff where if the answer is wrong, someone makes a bad decision that could potentially have monetary impact, right? So it's pretty high stakes. Um, Before I started working on this, I was in distributed systems and cloud architecture. I spent time in network operations, product management, and now in engineering. The thing that connects all of it for me is this obsession with making technology invisible. The best systems are always the ones that people stop noticing because they just work. And if you like what you see and want to chat more about any of this, my socials are here on the screen. Oh, and by the way, you can follow along with my presentation here at this URL. It's already up on my site. Um, so any links and references that you see in here, you can access them pretty easily. Before I get into the lessons, I want to be upfront about the lens that I'm coming from because context really matters here. These lessons come from building for business users, not data analysts, not developers. And most enterprise data is structured, like I said, and in SQL databases. So think of this as predominantly a text to SQL problem. Users are asking your AI questions in natural language, and your agents need to be able to translate it into a SQL query across hundreds of complex tables. But your business users, they don't know SQL. They don't understand all of the complexity of your backend schemas. They don't know what a context window is. They don't care, right? They just want answers that they can trust. And my experience here is primarily in multi-agent systems. It's over structured data. It's in production with thousands of daily users. And like I said, it operates in an environment with real compliance requirements and internal jargon that would make your head hurt. It makes my head hurt, right? And I'm saying this because if you're building something similar, a lot of these will really hit home. If you're building something different, some of these will still apply, but your mileage may vary. And also worth noting, some of these patterns are starting to pop up in the broader ecosystem, right? If you've been following projects like OpenClaw, you'll see echoes of that throughout this presentation. And others are just deeply specific to enterprise data. Um, but again, the thread that connecting all of them is it's really the same. It's never about the model or the framework or the protocol or today's AI acronym of the day, MCP, A2A. It's really about what happens between the model and the person using it, and however you're making that accessible to them. Many in the industry have also started calling this the harness. So a lot of these lessons will talk about what patterns your harness should be able to accommodate. So with that, I'm going to get started with my top 10 lessons here. And I chose to do this in a top 10 format. So in case I suck and this is boring for you at any given point in time, you know how much longer I have left to go. Okay, so lesson one, and this is the one that bit us first. Every organization has its own dialect, right? Acronyms, abbreviations, product names that mean completely different things depending on which team you're on. Now, you can spend months trying to fine-tune a model to get it to understand your lingo, understand your schemas. It's expensive, it's hard. I don't know if too many companies have managed to crack this yet. And the foundation models are getting better and better at context management, at instruction following. So that is helping, but you still got to give them the right context. And the problem here is that a base language model will be extremely confident when it encounters ambiguity, such as acronyms, such as your internal, jargon, and it won't say, "I'm not sure what you mean." It'll just pick an interpretation that it thinks it's right and run with it. And most of the time, it'll pick wrong. And the user won't even realize until the data comes back and nothing makes sense. The example on the screen is NPS. If you're in customer success, that could mean Net Promoter Score. If you're in networking, that could mean network protection solutions. Same three letters, totally different universe. And large organizations have thousands of these, right? Not dozens, we're thousands. So what we learned is you have to resolve this ambiguity before anything else happens, right? As early as possible in your workflow, you extract the acronyms, you use the surrounding sentence to figure out which meaning is most likely. You pull from an internal index using vector search and you inject the resolved definitions into the context. So by the time it reaches your agents that are going to actually execute, that ambiguity is gone, right? They're working with clean, unambiguous input. And some of the numbers in my experience are wild, right? Roughly half of all queries that people ask in the enterprise contain an acronym. And so therefore would benefit from this disambiguation step, right? So really important. Lesson number two, sensible defaults. This next one really goes against a natural instinct you may have as a developer, right? When a query is ambiguous, the natural thing to do is to ask the user to clarify, right? Especially business users, they may not know how to prompt in an ideal way. So somebody asks, show me sales performance. You go back and ask which region, what time period, which metric. And it feels like you're being helpful, you're being precise, but what you're actually doing is creating friction, right? Every back and forth turn is a tax on the user's patience. And Microsoft Research actually published a paper showing that LLM accuracy degrades up to 33% in extended multi-turn conversations, right? So not only are you annoying the user, you're actively making the model worse at answering the question the more you do this, right? What works in my experience instead is you assume some sensible defaults and then be absolutely transparent about it, right? So someone says, show me sales performance. You show them all regions, you run for the current quarter, but you also display exactly what assumptions you made, right? And make that as apparent as possible in your response. The user can glance at it and at this point they can go, oh, I actually wanted to focus just on the West Coast. So let me narrow it from there, right? And that's like one turn instead of what could have potentially been four. That matters even more when you're doing text to SQL because there's this constant mismatch and misalignment between how business users describe things and how the database actually labels them. So they could say active customers, but in the schema on the back end, it says status, and the value you're looking for is current, right? But if you show them the filters you applied in the language that they understand, at least they can catch that mismatch. And that's the moment that trust gets built. It's not when you get it right, it's when you're honest about how you got there. Lesson number three, guide discovery. And here's something that nobody tells you when you're building these systems, right? Many times your users have no idea what your system can actually do. They know they can type a question and they know words will come back, but they don't know the boundaries. They don't know exactly what data you have plugged in and available for AI to use. And if you leave it to the model to suggest good follow-ups, you're going to have a pretty bad time, right? Because again, the model will happily suggest things that your system can't actually do. And now you will have set an expectation and immediately broken it. So the contrast here is on the screen. You can do something generic, with naive prompting. Is there anything else you would like to know at the end of every response that you come back with? That leads nowhere, right? The conversation kind of dies. But something like, would you like me to break this down by product line is specific, right? It's actionable, and more critically, the system can definitely fulfill it. You're teaching the user what's possible through example rather than hoping that they'll discover this path or this direction on their own, right? And the impact is real. I've seen about 40% follow-up interactions come from these guided suggestions, right? We sort of nudge the user in a particular direction and they just have to say yes, sure. And it feels like magic to them. But there's a lot of nuance that's happening in the background. And that's what I have called out here as the architectural insight is that this has to be its own thing. You can't just bolt it onto your main agent. It needs its own trigger policies, its own understanding of what the system can actually do, and also a novelty filter. So you're not suggesting the same thing over and over again, right? That would feel robotic. Um, and so I found this pattern important enough that I open sourced it as a LangGraph node. It's called Compass because it's supposed to guide the direction of your conversation. The link is on the slide. And if you're building with LangGraph, it drops right in. So definitely check that out. Lesson number four, security is not an LLM problem. This one is probably the shortest lesson of them all because the answer is the simplest. Access control cannot live in a prompt. To some people, this is obvious. To many, it is not. You inject a system message that says, hey, this user can see these accounts, only return data from those, and it might work for the first query, maybe the second. By the time the third turn, the model's attention has drifted, right? Or someone figures out a creative way to ask, and your guardrails don't work. And you simply cannot go to a security review or to an audit and say, hey, we've put permissions in the prompt and it mostly works. The only approach that holds up here is making access control completely, entirely deterministic and completely invisible to the model and to your agents, right? And the model's job is to formulate the query. If it's SQL, so be it. You need code and primitives and predicates that inject access before anything hits the database. And the model never even knows what to do with access or how the filtering happened from an access perspective. And when the filtering produces empty results, and we'll talk about this on the next slide, next lesson as well, um, you need to be transparent with your users, right? You need to tell them, hey, records exist, but they aren't visible to you. So it's a little bit more actionable, and they know what happened and why they didn't get a response that they expected back. Lesson number five, which is continuing on the same thread, empty results, right? It's, and no data found is like the laziest, most trust destroying thing your system can say because it's ambiguous, right? And ambiguity is the enemy of trust. So when a query returns nothing, right? When a user's prompt returns nothing, um, from my perspective, there are at least three completely different things that might have happened, right? And the user deserves to know which one. Maybe the data exists, but they can't see it because of access controls. That's lesson number four, right? Tell them that. Maybe the entity exists, but nothing matches their specific filters, right? They ask for something in Q3, but perhaps there are orders in Q2. Um, Again, explain what was searched and what came up empty, right? Be transparent. Or maybe the filter values themselves don't exist, right? Maybe we misspelled the name, right? Maybe the ID format we used was wrong. In that case, again, analyze which filter eliminated everything and suggest a correction, right? The rule of thumb here that I like to follow is that your synthesis step should never be allowed to say no results without an explanation, right? If it feels like a small thing, but it completely changes how users perceive your system, they stop wondering, is this thing broken? And start understanding its realistic boundaries, right? Again, and that's where you go from a tool that people try to a tool that people really trust. Lesson number six, personalization. Um, and this is one where adoption actually lives or dies, right? You can build the most accurate system in the world, but if it treats every user exactly the same way, engagement will plateau, right? People expect an assistant to know them. That's the whole premise of the word assistant. Um, three mechanisms that changed everything for us, right? First was shortcuts, very similar to slash commands that you might have seen in Cloud Code, in Cursor. It lets users define their own command aliases, right? So instead of typing out a complex multi-line query every morning, they can just type something like slash pipeline. And this can have params and variables like West, in this case, is a region. So they just want to look at their pipeline in US West, for example, and this would expand to a long form prompt that they have written once. And now it gives them repeatability, right? It seems simple, but users who create five or more shortcuts show about 2 to 3 times the engagement of everybody else, right? They've invested in the system. It's theirs now. That is what will make them come back. Second was scheduled delivery. Every Monday, send me a summary of something, right? This is the behavior change moment, right? The user isn't coming to the AI anymore. The AI is coming to them, right? They get insights without logging in to this separate tab at 8 a.m. every morning, without remembering to ask. And then I guess that's what turns a tool into a habit, right? When it's bringing you in as and when necessary versus you having to probe it every single time. Third was long-term memory. Again, there's a lot going on in the industry right now around this topic. Um, just say in natural language, hey, remember that this particular client is price sensitive. And the AI remembers, right? Across sessions, across weeks, across threads. Next time that particular client comes up, the system already knows the context, right? And here's where it gets interesting. Memory has compounding benefits, right? It can feed into Compass and what we saw, with follow-up suggestions. The more the system knows about you, the more you give it to work with, the better its guided follow-ups will become, right? So personalization and discovery create this virtuous cycle that sort of gets better the more your users use it. Again, you're incentivizing usage. Lesson number 7, UI context. And your AI has blind spots if it only sees chat. Um, Most people in the enterprise, and I see this all the time, right? They treat context as conversation history, right? The messages that you have sent back and forth in a thread. But think about how you actually work, right? Think about how people do their job, right? You're probably working out of multiple tools every single day, right? You're staring at a dashboard. You've got filters applied. You're looking at a specific set of accounts or tickets, and then you turn to your assistant and ask, "Hey, what should I work on, or what should I prioritize?" And the assistant has no idea what you're looking at, right? It only sees your text in isolation. So it gives you a generic answer that has nothing to do with the filtered view or whatever else you might have going on your screen, right? And as a user, you just think this thing doesn't get it, right? It doesn't know me. Um, what if you could pass the UI state as explicit context to every turn, right? What filters are applied, what objects are selected, what data scope the user is currently looking at. And now when somebody asks, hey, what should I prioritize? The answer is kind of grounded in what they're seeing and what they're looking at, right? That cognitive load of having to explain themselves again significantly drops. And the system, your chat interface or whatever it is that you may be building, it feels like an extension of the interface rather than separate thing that you have to context switch into. And this extends to a broader principle too, right? The AI should ingest the same stimulus as the human, right? If they change a tab, the context changes. If they get forwarded an email, that becomes a context too. You got to embed AI where humans already work. Don't make them come to you, right? That's the core lesson. And we will dive deeper into this in the next couple of lessons as well. Lesson number 8, platform advantage. And this lesson took us the longest to learn, really. You will never be able to anticipate every workflow your users need, right? Every time you ship one, someone will ask for a variation that you didn't think of, right? And more often than not, that becomes an excuse for why people don't use it, right? It doesn't work for me, right? And if every variation requires your engineering team to build it, you have obviously created a bottleneck that will eventually kill your momentum. If you're not shipping fast enough, people are going to abandon it. So the shift in thinking is exposing your agents and exposing your tools as composable building blocks instead of trying to build every workflow yourself, right? You give users the primitives, you gather data, make a decision, take an action, synthesize results, and let them describe the recipe in natural language, right? Every Monday, pull my top 5 accounts by revenue, check if any of them have declining usage, and send me a summary of the ones that need most attention. There's a lot that the system needs to figure out here. Which building blocks to change to get chain together. You know, perhaps show them a preview, let them test it, sort of dry run it, and then if they're happy, save it and then run it for them. Right? This is no code, no GR tickets. Langsmith's Agent Builder is a great example of doing this. And I know this sounds like personalization, which was lesson number 6, but it's actually fundamentally different from my perspective. Personalization is about adapting the system to you, right? That was shortcuts, memory, preferences. Um, this is about letting users create entirely new capabilities that didn't exist before. They're not customizing what you built, they're building on top of it, right? And the users who do this, again, become your strongest advocates because they've shaped the system to work for them, to their needs. And again, that's the difference between a product and a platform. So create a platform. Lesson number 9, we're getting close to the end here. Meet people where they work. You meet people where they work. You build a beautiful chat interface. You're proud of it. Your users open it once. They think this is nice. And then they go back to living in email, in Slack channels, in video calls, because that's where the work actually happens, right? And if your AI only works inside of your app, it'll always be a side quest. It'll always be, another tab in the browser that somebody has to go to, that somebody has to open in order to use it. Something that they have to remember to go use, right? So why not bring the AI to them, right? And this is the open claw teaching moment for the enterprise. You should be able to CC your AI assistant on an email thread, right? It reads the context, picks out the ask, runs the work using the full toolkit of what you built, and it responds with the results, right? You should be able to tag it in a Slack channel. It should work alongside the rest of your group, answer questions, pull data, right? Not in a one-on-one silo as a chatbot would, but as more like a part of the team's flow as a teammate. And then the highest form of this is proactive intelligence, right? Don't wait to be asked. Monitor for changes in the background. This is where ambient agents are really good. Detect things that don't look right and surface insights before the user even has to ask, or knows where to look, right? Something just changed status, key metric crossed a certain threshold, the assistant pings you before or while you're having your morning coffee, right? That's event driven, not query driven as a chatbot would be. And there's this line that I love and keep coming back to. The measure of a great assistant isn't what it can answer, it's how little the user has to remember to ask. So keep that in mind. And with that, our final lesson, which I assume to this audience is fairly obvious at this point, build AI with AI. And this is the meta lesson here, I guess. Everything I've been talking about tonight, acronym resolution, guided discovery, workflows, all of it represents sort of encoded constraints. You're taking general intelligence and you're channeling it into something useful by giving it structure, by giving it guardrails, by giving it domain knowledge, conventions. The exact same principles should apply to how you build the system, right? You should encode your code-based conventions and your architecture patterns and your domain requirements into skills, into commands for more, complex multi-step operations that your whole team shares. And so anytime you onboard a new developer or you switch AI coding assistants, because there's so many good ones out there now, they can contribute effectively from day one because the context is built into your repo. And that has allowed me, at least personally, to ship features that used to take, multi-week sprints to ship in days, right? And again, that also has a compounding effect. It's self-documenting, and that's a great benefit of skills. So your project keeps getting better, your guidance keeps getting better, and the same model, same foundation model that you're using in Cursor, Cloud Code, Codex, with your conventions, your patterns, your examples, writes code that fits your code base, like it was written by really a senior team member, senior developer on your team. All right, takeaways. So these are the 10. Not all of these are glamorous, right? Some of these are fairly obvious in hindsight. Some of them are emerging patterns that will define the next generation of AI products. Others are, at least I consider them foundational, that just need to be solid for you to be able to scale past the hype. But every single one of these, they compound, right? And you get a few of them right, you will have built a successful tool. You get most of them right, you have something people that actually depend on. That's all I've got today, and I'm gonna be writing more about these patterns, and I would love to hear what resonates with you and your work. Again, my socials are here up on the screen if you want to connect and chat more, and I'll take any questions for a couple of minutes that people might have.